Over the past month, Supergirl Gamer Pro has been holding their annual tournament for women and non binary people that is built to encourage women to participate in competitive tournaments and on teams at a higher level. However, this tournament has been plagued by some issues that raises the question, is this tournament actually doing more harm than good? Let's talk about it. Before I get into my points, I want to make it clear that this is not intended as a hate video towards Supergirl Gamer Pro. This is just a critique of some of the issues that have come up and why I think they are issues and things that need to be addressed not only within the scene, but directly by tournaments trying to run tournaments of this type for marginalized people and genders. So I have three main points. First, I want to talk about why I think tournaments for marginalized groups are important, especially tournaments for women and non binary people. Secondly, I want to talk about tournaments, why I think tournaments like this that allow men to be on these teams is an issue. And thirdly, I want to talk about why this tournament's testing to check the validity of a trans person's gender identity is a big problem. So, first off, I'm a huge believer that tournaments that are all women or tournaments that are for women and non binary people, etc., tournaments for marginalized groups are super important to the scene. Because while it's an idealistic dream to say, well, why don't they just compete in men's tournaments? Why don't they just join men's teams if they're really that good? That's not realistic. Sexism is an actual thing that happens, and there are plenty of stories from women and non binary people in the scene that will tell you that they tried to join a team and that as soon as that team found out that they were a girl or that they were non-binary, etc., that they were discriminated against and they didn't get an offer to join that team simply because of their gender. This is a big issue because this, as well as the harassment and sexism that happens on the solo queue ladder, as well as outside of that, if you're a popular figure, or the sexism and harassment you get on Reddit, on Twitter, etc., is something that plagues marginalized genders on a daily basis and discourages them from wanting to compete and wanting to get to the top and try to make their dream of going pro a reality. These tournaments are built to help encourage more women, more non binary people to compete, to feel comfortable competing in the scene. And these tournaments work. If you look at Valorant, Valorant has been running an all women's tournament sponsored by Riot almost since the inception of Valorant esports, and it has worked. Valorant has one of the largest competitive female player bases out of any esport. In fact, it might be the largest of any esport. I would have to do some research on it, but they're consistently fielding over 16 teams of women and non binary people at these tournaments. It is massive and it is working. Eventually, the goal is to not have to have these tournaments, obviously. We want to have integrated teams. We want to have integrated tournaments. We want to have tournaments where women can join a team, feel comfortable they won't be discriminated against, and compete at the same level without feeling like they're just eye candy or they're just there as a marketing ploy. But right now, that's not the reality. So these tournaments are important and these tournaments are necessary. And I think they're a good thing to have. And I applaud SGGP for attempting to have a tournament like this. However, tournaments like this come with issues that you have to face. The first of which is allowing men to compete in these tournaments. One of the big things that happens anytime Valorant or Overwatch or League tournament admins announce we're having an all women / non-binary individual tournament is that men start screaming, this is discrimination. Why can't men compete? Why you're pushing more sexism, etc. Which is not really the case, but I don't want to get into that. But there is a bigger issue with letting men compete in these tournaments than there is with not letting them compete in these tournaments. And that is that if you allow men to compete in these tournaments, like SGGP did, where they had a rule that 3 out of 5 members of a team had to be female identifying or non binary, and 2 could be men. You get issues like have popped up in this tournament where some of these teams have 2 high elo GM plus challenger or players on their team that are men. There are players like Saskia who has competed for Winthrop and has competed at the top of amateur. There are players like Kitsuo who has competed at the top of amateur and goes to the University of St. Thomas. The list goes on as far as the players that are competing in this tournament, including former academy players that are competing in this tournament. And I don't blame these guys for playing. Their friends asked them to play. But I blame the tournament organizer for allowing it. Because when you go up as a team full of 3 women or 5 women or a mix of women and non-binary people, or even if you have 2 men on your team, but your like highest rank is like mid diamond, and you go up against a team of like consistent diamonds and then like 2 GM plus guys, and those 2 guys absolutely just smurf and carry the game, it looks bad. Because not only on the broadcast does it look bad because they're popping off, so the attention is going to be on them and their performance, obviously. So not only are you taking eyes away from women competing, and a lot of eyes, mind you, the SGGP channel was getting anywhere from 600 to over 1,000 viewers at any point in time. You were taking eyes away from these women doing these things because the men are popping off and they are stealing the show. And then beyond that, it perpetuates an idea that's already an issue in the scene. And that is that women cannot reach high elo without being boosted or carried by men. And when you have teams of women that have 2 GM plus men on their team, just absolutely winning game after game after game because those men are smurfing and those men are absolutely dominating these series because they're just massive skill gap in some of these series, because this is an uncapped league, right? Anyone from gold to challenger can play in this league. There are going to be skill gaps like this. It perpetuates the idea that these men are carrying the women. And it perpetuates the idea that women need men to carry them in these competitive tournaments. And that is problematic. When your tournament is supposed to be focused on empowering and encouraging women to compete, and then you have high elo men, known names in the scene that have competed in academy, that have competed in amateur, coming in and stealing the spotlight and perpetuating bad ideas by smurfing, it is going to cause issues. It is going to discourage other women from wanting to compete. Because why would I, as a woman, want to compete if I'm gold? Why would I want to sign up a tournament that promotes itself as encouraging women and giving women a space to compete that is encouraging and supporting and promotes them? But then men come in and just absolutely smurf on you and demolish your team. That's demoralizing and that's discouraging because that's just perpetuating the issue that already exists. It is frustrating beyond belief. So, personally, I do not believe tournaments like this should allow men in. But as it is, SGGP did. And it caused a lot of criticism and a lot of frustration within the scene. I'm not the only person to have spoken out about it. I tweeted about it. Others have tweeted about it. It is an issue, and it is a prevalent issue that needs to be addressed. My last point is that this tournament is open to non-binary identifying people as well as transgender individuals, trans women. And I'm going to preface this by saying, as a trans woman myself, there's no good way to really validate if someone is who they say they are. But the test that SGGP ran to validate if a trans woman really identified as a woman was a voice test. Now, you've been watching this video, you understand that I have a very masculine voice. I understand that. My voice is not very feminine, it's something I'm working on, but I would not pass a voice test. I sound like a guy, and I understand that. That's a reality for me. But I have lived the last 3 years of my life openly out as a trans woman. And I would potentially not be allowed to compete simply because I still have a masculine voice. That is a big, big, big issue because you are invalidating a ton of people's experiences and identities and taking away opportunities for them to compete. And now I understand there's a big issue. There was an issue within SGGP about a man pretending to be non-binary, excuse me, in order to compete. And that's a problem in itself as well. And you can't ask for ID because not every trans person has legally had their name changed. There's a lot of issues that go into this and a lot of nuance. But a voice test is the worst possible system. It is a test predicated on how well a trans woman can pass as a cis woman. Not all of us can. Not all of us can change our voice that way. Not all of us can look or sound or convince people that we are a cis woman, and we shouldn't have to. Our identity isn't valid based on how well we pass. Our identity is valid no matter what. There needs to be a better system in place. Do I have all the answers for that system? No, I don't. But right now, this system, it's not working. SGGP and women's / non-binary people only tournaments in the league scene need drastic improvements and need change. And I'm making this video not out of hate, but because I want to help be a force for that change. And if I say it and others say it and we speak out about it, the hope is that SGGP and the people running things over there will hear us and will implement said change so that things can get better. That's the end goal. So if you agree with this goal, if you don't, if you have points you want to make, please leave a comment below. I'd love to have a discussion. You can also DM me on Twitter. It'll be linked in the bio, in the description. Leave a subscription if you want to share this with your friends or share it on Twitter. Try to get SGGP's attention. That is great as well. But at the end of the day, I appreciate you guys listening. And yeah, have a good one. And I will be back next week.